My family moved to Alaska when I was 2. We've been living with my grandma. This is back in 1955. When I say my family, I mean my dad, Jennings Delose Connor, who everybody called Jinx, and my mom, Ewarda June, and of course my big brother, Chris Patrick. We always called him Chris Patrick till he went off to school, and then he found out that he could go by Chris. But that's a different story. When we moved to Alaska, we found that hunting and fishing were unbelievably wonderful. My mom and dad had always been hunters and fishermen, but now suddenly they were surrounded by infinite opportunity. Of course, my mom's main challenge ended up raising my brother and I, but my dad put meat on the table, literally, by going off and hunting caribou and moose mainly, and we even had a fish net down on Turnagain Arm. So we lived very well. Of course, I always wanted to go hunting and fishing. I had my own 22, and I had all kinds of aspirations of shooting a moose. My dad's favorite thing to shoot was moose, and our favorite thing to eat was moose. In the 11 years we lived in Alaska, we ate 9 moose. Danged if I weren't 14 before I had my first piece of beef, at least that I can remember. Anyway, my dad finally agreed to take me on a moose hunt. I don't mean one walking through the woods across the highway from our house. I mean a real moose hunt where you hire a bush pilot, fly out over the tundra till you find a lake with a moose standing on it, land, shoot the moose, and bring it home, which is exactly what we did. After some time talking to our bush pilot, we decided to get ready to go. And then the guy suggested that maybe my dad ought to sight his rifle in. My dad assured him that his rifle was sighted in, but the bush pilot was concerned, and so he set up a target on a shooting range in his back, and my dad lined up his rifle, and boom! The guy walked halfway down, shook his head, said, "You missed the target entirely." My dad said, "You better look a little closer." The guy walked down there, ripped the cardboard off the fence, marched back up, and showed it to my dad. The bullet had went right exactly through the round hole that is the center dot in the middle of the target. There you go. My dad was a good shot. We flew around until, sure enough, we saw a big bull moose standing about waist deep out in a lake. And so the float plane, as was its wont, was landed on the lake about 300, 400 yards away from the moose, and the bush pilot taxied quietly towards the moose. But at about 270 yards, my dad was really good at estimating these things. The pilot stopped the plane, and my dad got quietly out and proceeded down along the front of the plane, along the floats. There he lined up his rifle, and whaboo! First shot went off. The moose turned around and started walking up the bank. The guy shook his head and goes, "He missed." Then whaboo! A second shot went off just as the moose walked up on the bank, and it went down, crash. Well, he got it that time. My dad climbed back in the cab, and we headed towards the beach. When we got ashore, the guide was the first one to the moose, and he goes, "My dad, you hit it twice." Indeed, my dad had shot it down just above the knee, and then the kill shot, which is the one he always wanted, in the neck. Well, we proceeded to skin and gut and behead and de-antler the moose. But with all those quarters of moose meat stacked in the plane, there was no room for the 12-year-old kid. So my dad, warning me to stay away from the guts because it might attract a bear, handed me his rifle and said to watch carefully for bears, that they'd be back. The plane took off. For 2 hours, I contemplated what it would be like to have to kill a bear and kept reminding myself that I needed to hit it in the neck. But before long, well, if you don't count 2 hours as long. The plane was back and taxiing up, and I found a seat, and we flew back to our moose meat and a great adventure cutting it up. So, my great life in Alaska was punctuated by moose meat.